My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm here with Chad Robichaux. Chad, with the Mighty Oaks Foundation.
That's right, yeah.
And Chad and I, we've known each other for a couple of years now. You've been on Dad Talk today. Want to tell you how much we appreciate that. But tell us a little bit about the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and then about the other things we'll talk about. We'll go into that afterwards.
Yeah, well, Mighty Oaks Foundation is a faith-based veteran service organization. We do a couple of things. One is we do resiliency events. So we get invited to go to speak at bases around the world. In the last 10 years, I've spoken to about 250,000 active duty troops on spiritual resiliency, on suicide prevention, to combat the 20+ a day suicide rate in the veteran community, post-traumatic stress, dealing with all those issues. And then on our recovery side, we run a program called the Legacy Program, where active duty service members, veterans, first responders, spouses come to our ranches. We have several ranches around the country, and we take them through a 1-week peer-to-peer, non-clinical peer-to-peer mentoring program, followed on by lifelong aftercare. And we've had 4,000 graduates in the last 10 years, but now we're doing about 1,000 per year. It's about $5 million a year in programming, and we do it all for absolutely free, including paying for the travel of all those that come to our program. And then on the other side of that, because we have had such a success with faith-based solutions, we do a lot of advocacy work in Washington, D.C. So I worked with the Trump administration. I was the chairman of the White House Faith-Based Coalition. And was able to help bring faith-based policy back into the VA and DOD. And President Obama signed the executive order in 2009 to pull it out, and spent billions of dollars in 1,500 new clinical programs, which made the problem worse. Went from 16 a day suicides to 22 a day in a period of 2 years. And so I was able to work with President Trump to get executive order signed. I worked on the Prevents bill with President Trump to get faith-based solutions put into that. And so we've been able to bring a lot of faith-based solutions back into the VA and DOD through policy because of the successes we've had at Mighty Oaks Foundation.
That's tremendous. You talked about the 22 suicides a day figure. Is that still accurate? Have you seen any change in that?
Well, the last report has been a couple of years now, and we have seen the numbers go down. I think the last report that is tracking is actually 19 a day. So some of the solutions we know are working. We don't know what the real number is because only 50% of the demographic is actually reported. So we don't know what the real number is. However, what we're seeing in the last 2 years is a 44% increase in active duty suicides, and we don't know what the increase is that's in the active duty community. We don't know what the increase is in the veteran community. We assume it to be pretty high because of COVID and restrictions and isolation, telehealth care from going in person, and we again, we don't have the report on how many suicides, what the increase is, but what we do know is the suicide hotline is up 1,000%. And so COVID has really been a huge impact and restrictions and isolations to the veteran community, and all of those suffering with mental illness and things like anxiety and stress, and when you're being forced to isolate. So we know that has a big impact. We have seen the highest application rate at Mighty Oaks Foundation in the last since in 10 years, this past 2 years. And in addition, with the withdrawal of Afghanistan, that has severely impacted the veteran community with feeling of value in their service, loss of friends, Gold Star parents, people that lost their sons or lost their limbs or mind or soul in Afghanistan. Now they're wondering, was it worth it? And if you're a veteran listening, yes, it was worth it. No decision that a government can make could take away the amazing work that our veterans did there in the last 20 years to help make that place a better place. But if you're struggling with that, then get help. And Mighty Oaks, our programs are free, and we will help. You just got to go to mightyoaksprograms.org to get that help.
So, Chad, I want to ask you a couple of things here. When you mentioned I'm hoping as well that the suicide rate is going down, that number that you mentioned. I hope it is going down under the 20 figure, 19, and go back further even yet. But we've talked with a lot of people that have attributed suicide to the family courts, to the divorce situation, to the family breakdown. When you're on deployment, there's a lot of stresses that take place. Sometimes when veterans go into courts, the civilian judges don't understand the issues veterans deal with. I'm also heard that there have been some veterans courts around that may be a little bit more sympathetic to veterans. So the two questions here is, do you know anything about the veterans courts? And the other thing is, how much of an impact is the family issue? Family courts and, say, divorce or separation like that, how much is that contributing to the suicide rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the number one contributors to veteran suicide for those who are married, because once they start dealing with anxiety, depression, and become suicide, getting that low dark place, they start losing their family, they feel like they've let their family down. They're no longer a good husband or father. And the truth is, the judges and the courts have not been favorable to male veterans to fathers. And I know there's males and females in the military, but let's be honest, the majority of people in the military are males.
Right.
And they deploy. And when they deploy, the mom stays home and raises the kids. But in many cases, that family's not able to sustain the deployment. And so while this man is overseas serving their country, the wife leaves, goes back home to whatever state they're from, and takes the kids with them. And the male that's out there deployed has no ability to deal with that while he's out there. So maybe he's gone another 9 months to a year before he can even deal with it. By then, she's filed for divorce. She's put the kids in another school in another state. And so now comes back home.
Any silver bullets at the same time as well?
Yeah, he's trying to do his job, and he can't come home. I mean, that's just, he can't do that, and he can't really deal with it from there. So now he comes home, and this process has already been long down the road, and they can't, and he's stationed somewhere, so he can't go back where wife and kids are to deal with that local court system. Right. And so it's very difficult, and you come home from combat, you left as a husband and father, and now you're neither. Yeah. And the courts are going to look at the situation and say, well, the kids are stable now, and mom's here, and now dad's maybe dealing with PTSD or anxiety, because of course if it's a spiteful wife, she's going to throw those in there and say the husband's not safe. And so we see that happen so much, where guys come home to not having their family anymore, and not be in a real position to fight that battle. And that's why I love what you guys do at Dad Talk, to really bring those issues to the surface, and your legal counsel and advice to be able to come in and say, like, hey, this is not fair to a father. This is not fair to a husband to be just automatically to have this kind of natural response to say mom's going to be the best person for them.
Yeah. So let me just take off on this for a moment here, because if you're overseas as a veteran, and if you have a loan or something with a financial institution, there are certain protections that you have.
Sure.
And I'm just wondering, I just was thinking about this. Do you think that they ought to have some type of protections for families along those matters, along those same lines, like if a husband's deployed, a wife's deployed, whatever, that, any type of family court proceedings or divorce proceedings or something like that, they get put on hold, because let's be honest, it affects military readiness, it affects the morale of a person who's overseas, and if he's affected, his battle buddies are affected.
Absolutely.
It becomes a disaster.
Nothing should be able to happen until that service member gets home, male or female, and in that sense.
Right.
Nothing should be able to happen when it comes home, but that's not the case. They would say, well, he has access to a JAG there. Well, maybe he does, but that's not reality. Yeah. That's not reality. If he's out, clearing the streets of Fallujah, he doesn't have access to a JAG lawyer, right? I mean, it's just. It's not the reality.
To be distracted under those circumstances, but for any reason.
This isn't a normal job.
This isn't a normal job.
He can't take his lunch break and go see the lawyer, or when he gets off at 4:30, he goes see the lawyer. That's not the reality. Yeah. And so there needs to be some compassion and honestly just some practical common sense involved. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah. So to continue on here about the veterans courts, what would be the advantages of having veterans courts as opposed to just civilian courts? Would there be more compassion that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think and veteran courts are popping up all over the country. They continue to, and I've been an advocate for them, and have been involved with. I've testified in veterans courts. I've helped one of the greatest court systems I've seen is actually in California in San Luis Obispo County. There's a district attorney there named Dan Dow, who's a reserve. I think he's a major or lieutenant colonel in the Army National Guard. He's an incredible man, but he's really he's like kind of the model there. But the issue with veterans courts, not the issue, the parameters you have to understand is if you're going to go into the veteran court system, you have to plead guilty. So we're talking about people that are actually guilty to something.
Okay.
And so they plead guilty, and by pleading guilty, there's some compassion given to them and some leeway, and they have to participate in whatever programs the veterans court assigns to them as a penance for their either expunged sentence or reduced sentence.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting thing, because when it comes down to the family court issues, then what are they pleading guilty to? I'm not familiar with the veterans courts that much.
The veteran court system is for criminal court.
Okay.
So it has nothing to do with divorce or family court or anything like that.
Okay.
So it's strictly they committed a crime, they got a DUI. they got in a fight. There's domestic violence involved, but they have to actually be guilty. If they're innocent and have a false accusation against them, or it's a misunderstanding, or it's not actually a crime, then maybe they don't want to plead guilty. So because they don't plead guilty, they're not qualified for veteran court.
Got it. Okay.
So there's nothing for innocent veterans out there.
I'm glad that you brought that clarification, because I don't know a lot about the veterans courts, and I've heard a few things mentioned, and I'm glad for that clarification. So one final question before we go on to the other issues then. When some of these instances take place, veteran comes home, he's not with his family, not with his kids, he may have a domestic charge, he may have some type of violence charge against him or whatever that is non-existent.
Right.
He's got PTSD, so PTSD does not turn you into a monster.
Right.
But all of these various things go on, and then sometimes there's nothing that veterans can do, or the active duty person can do about a divorce, because most times it's just granted. There's no defense against this.
Right.
But and then I've seen instances where veterans who are disabled and they have disability checks coming in, they're taking their disability money for child support, and the veteran doesn't have anything. My understanding was, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I thought the disability checks and stuff like that was supposed to be for the veteran because he's disabled, not to be looked at as another source of revenue for child support. Am I incorrect in that?
No, you are correct. There's court systems that have gone after veterans' disability and disability checks. I mean, you're right. It's given to them for a reason, because they don't have the ability. In some cases, don't have the ability to work, so they have to rely on that. But but court systems have gone after that and put veterans in a very tough financial situation. If they're getting it for a reason that they're stable, then they don't have the means to go out and make more income to take care of themselves.
Right. So let's try.